Well, what's the point of slogging away for those other 6 hours if it's not something you enjoy?
I get it to that hour 4, and then it almost like I lose the motivation because I'm not good at that part.
This is Eric, a man of many careers who currently sells pens to astronauts. He leads a team at work, and on the side, he's a big gamer and game show contestant. We're talking about how he's built to pivot and how he'll turn his many ideas into reality.
I ended up getting on a game show called The Floor. This is a game where from episode 1 to episode 2, the entire trajectory of the game changes after every single duel.
It sounds like you're on the right game show. You operate best when things aren't always just a system and a pattern. You're best when the plan gets messed up. What I see sometimes with people with a similar Kolbe result to yours is not that you overvalue yourself. I want you to value yourself a ton and be super confident, but not if it gets to the point where you start thinking, oh yeah, I did all the important stuff. Now they're going to do the easy, boring parts. They're doing parts that are just as important, just as difficult, meaning you know they're difficult because you want to hand them over. So make sure that you're giving them the credit that they deserve. And kind of just jumping right in with your Kolbe results, you're a let's just pivot and find a way and make it work kind of person. I mean, you are an idea generating powerhouse is that's kind of the phrase we use for your natural advantage. So, whether it's just finding a space to be your work from home office or professionally, I imagine you're kind of the same. So tell us a little bit more about kind of what you do in your day job.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I have had many careers, but traditionally most of them have revolved around sales and marketing, but primarily sales, right? And I think that kind of pivots to what you were mentioning of like this idea powerhouse, where if you can't get creative, not just like on the fly with your customers and build rapport and build relationships, but also get creative with packages or how you can help people, it's very hard to excel, not just in sales, but probably in most things at life, right? So I transitioned into sales pretty early on. I currently work for a company called Fisher Space Pen, which is actually the pen that goes to space with the astronauts since 1968, which is really cool. Family-owned company here in Nevada, just outside of Las Vegas and Boulder City, with a really cool history and legacy. But right now, I'm the head of sales and marketing for that company. And to your point, there's a lot of ideas and pivoting that happens on a daily basis, which is really cool.
Is totally consistent with what I would think from your Kolbe result in that idea generating powerhouse and being the kind of person who pivots. It's also not, it's pretty common in salespeople at many levels to have that strength. It's not required by any means. I mean, there are some sales roles where, it's all about really knowing the details about the products you're selling. It's maybe, hey, we don't have tons of different clients. I have 3 clients and we just sell very detailed, like, huge systems, multi-million dollar systems we sell to a few or a couple clients. Then maybe it's not as much about the kind of strength that you bring to the pivoting and coming up with ideas and listening to what they're saying and coming up with something new and a special. But more than any other result, I think we find the result that you have in sales professionals. So yeah, not uncommon. I knew Fisher pens, and I thought that it was like the astronaut pens, and I saw the name when I was reading the briefing stuff on you, Fisher Space Pens. So it's kind of fun to know that. Is that how it got started? Like, was creating a pen specifically to go into space?
Yeah, so actually, it was Fisher Pen Company in 1948. And then in 1966, Paul C. Fisher invented the sealed and pressurized ink cartridge. And then in 1968, NASA was looking for, after the Apollo 1 fire, right? Like pencils can work in space, but they're conductive and can cause fires and can cause accidents. So NASA was looking for a reliable writing tool, and Paul C. Fisher had a tool that worked without gravity because it works off of nitrogen pressure instead of gravity pulling. And he gifted it to NASA, and that's been the pen that they've used on every manned space flight since. So it wasn't always Fisher Space Pen, but in 1968, it became the only space pen that
That's
goes to space with
fascinating.
the
Yeah,
astronauts.
very interesting. Um, So I know you also have interesting hobbies. We were talking just before we started recording about you are a game show contestant and gamer. So what does that look like? And I'm kind of curious to hear how that might fit in with your cognitive strengths also.
You know, it's really interesting doing the test like this, and even just the first statement you said about this like idea generator powerhouse. Because when it comes to, I'll start with kind of gaming and just like a few hobbies of mine. One is gaming, and I've always leaned into more role playing style games or chess strategy style games where keep coming up with creative ways to win instead of just doing the same thing over and over that works. Another thing that's interesting is I don't know if you know what a trading card game is, but there's trading card games out there where you actually get a set of functioning cards that all have different texts and words and interactions and resource curves and etc. And usually in those types of games, there's what's called a meta deck, which is like the top two or three best decks. And I've always had a passion of not playing those decks, but finding a way to beat them with a creative idea powerhouse that works better that maybe someone didn't think of that could potentially find a way to win. And then lastly, I was always the couch potato hero where when I'm watching like game shows like Survivor and stuff, or even just like with one of my friends that you guys work with, I was a pretty okay athlete. So there was times where I would watch these Survivor games or these baseball games, and I'd be like, man, I could do that. I used to do that. And at one point, my wife goes, if you can do it, why don't you just go apply? Start applying to game shows. And I was like, you know what? I will. And I did. And I ended up getting on a game show called The Floor on Fox with Rob Lowe, which is currently airing right now. Episode 8 just aired last night. And I'm doing pretty okay. So I went from couch potato hero to, doing okay on a game show. I'm still
So
alive,
how
which
do
is
you
fun.
see,
So
I mean, I know you can't give anything away that hasn't aired, but just how do you see using your cognitive strength, that quick start, risk taking, idea generating powerhouse? How did you see using that in that game show? Or did you? Maybe the format didn't lend itself to that.
it's really interesting because I think a lot of people went into this with a different strategy, right? And at the core of it, and maybe this is where my ideas and my brain starts going, at the core of it, this is a game with 100 squares and 100 categories, and you're trying to duel people in the categories, right? And I see that as the game, but then I think of like the deeper layers of this. How can I extrapolate this game to where I can give myself the best advantages to win, not by doing anything unethical, but by getting creative, by finding resources, or by capitalizing on situations or ideas and making them and pivoting that really quickly. And this is a game where from episode 1 to episode 2, the entire trajectory of the game changes after every single duel because categories are eliminated, people are moving, squares are shifting. So, what your strategy was 10 seconds ago, it now has to be a completely different pivoted strategy and idea to where it goes to next. So, I think I even say on the game, it's a game within a game within a game because the game is I'm dueling someone in a category. But then the game within that game is okay, I need to understand these categories, the pathways, and where I can go to get the most advantage. And then even the game within that game is I need to understand the people standing on top of these squares that are owning these categories. And if I feel confident to beat these people in these categories and trying to find the best advantages to give myself the most
Interesting.
opportunity to win.
Millions of people have discovered their natural way of taking action. What's yours? Go to Kolbe.com and take the Kolbe A Index to find out. Yeah, very, very cool. So let's talk a little bit more in depth about your Kolbe result. And feel free where you have questions or something's not clear, just jump in and ask me for clarification. So we've talked about your quick start, and we can maybe get back to that, but let's talk about the other three. And actually, I'll start with the pattern for you rather than just looking at individual, what we call action modes. Fact finder, follow through, and implementer are the other three. The pattern for you is you don't have any of them where we would describe your strength as being a counteract or kind of resistant strength. There's some people where in one of those action modes, really what they lead with there is pushing back. So for instance, in follow through, which is how we deal with systems and structure, some people really resist structure and bureaucracy, and they don't drive everything to completion. They leave kind of some open-ended things hanging out there. You might do that. You're a 4, so you're more toward that end of the spectrum than somebody who's really systematic and thorough and create, where the first thing they do is, all right, I'm going to put together a plan and a schedule and a calendar and map it all out. You kind of accommodate that. But it's interesting to me, and I think other people who would work with you, is you kind of go with the flow in those other 3. You've got your quick start, which is that idea generating, risk taking, hey, let's experiment with stuff and see what happens kind of strength. The other ones you accommodate. So I talked about systems and structure. That's the follow through. Fact finder is how we all deal with gathering and sharing information. So you're toward the end of the spectrum that's more about simplifying and looking at just some key information and data and not going deep, doing more and more research. But you don't push back on the research. You're just like, okay, yeah, got some stuff. That's good. Now let's move forward. You accommodate that. And then the other one, Implementor, is how we deal with 3-dimensional, tactile, kind of the physical world that we live in. And you also accommodate the need for physical, tangible building kind of solutions. You're not all the way toward that end of the spectrum. You're a little bit more on the envision, imagine side. But you'll kind of bounce back and forth in all of those and not really push back on people who are operating. What we see with this pattern a lot of times is somebody who really operates within a team where you are bringing the team together. You're getting people to work together. Now you've got that initiation and quick start. So that's where you'll really start to step forward. And I've heard some of that already with the way you've described yourself, where yeah, it's changing, and that's how you want a game to play. So it sounds like you're on the right game show because you operate best when things aren't always just a system and a pattern that you can count on and that is going to repeat. You're best when the plan gets messed up, which is what it sounds like they do from episode to episode. You need to find opportunities where you get to do novel things, whether it's you changing the rules or you're just in a situation where those patterns get broken down and where the system either hasn't been created or doesn't need to be followed rigorously all the time. You're going to do well. And most people, because you tend to do better in that, have a sense of accomplishment. It's just easier for you in that kind of situation.
Yeah, I think a really interesting thing, 2 things that really stuck out there. Well, there was a few. You're right with the chess scenario. Chess ended up getting inevitably pretty boring because they all do the same things, right? Which is why I started leaning more into that kind of trading card environment, because there's like there's new sets every 3 months with new envisionments and new cards and new play styles and new ways to play the game, which is really exciting, while also trying to capitalize on the older stuff. The other one is in the game show environment, having that ability to. The funniest part about our season right now is I'm being labeled as the head of this big alliance of people, right? Due to no real fault of my own, I didn't necessarily even know that I was in an alliance, but I think I have that gravitational pull or that bringing togetherness of people where I end up in those roles of people looking to that person to pivot, or kind of like, it was funny. I almost like to say I have these 2 conflicting attitudes a lot of the time. One is I'm very confident and driven, and the other is I come off very laissez-faire, like it's not a big deal. And my wife hates it, right? Because I'll be sitting there, the kids will kind of be over there about 10, 20, 25 feet, and I'll be watching them and just kind of like hanging out and watching. And she'll be like, "Are you going to call them? Are you going to go get them?" I'm like, "No, they're fine." Because like I know, based on how I've raised them and my ability to get to them at X
Right.
distance, I'm going to be okay. So I'm
Yeah.
relaxed, but I'm also confident. And it creates this really weird I think vibe for people to where they interact with me and they like me, but they're also like, I don't know if he's confident or cocky. I don't know if he's you know just way overconfident or if he's just lazy. It's like this really like interesting thing where um, that was happening a lot on the floor
Yeah.
where people were coming to me and rallying to me, and then I was being deemed the head of this alliance simply because people would want to be, I guess, connected or talking to me or interacting with me, which was really interesting. Um, and then yeah, the last one is just in relation to kind of the ideas side of it, and it's so funny when I think of you mentioned marketing is more researching and finding information, and sales is usually more kind of doing or executing on the information you found. And I was thinking about the difference between texting and calling, right? I will text, but if I need something or I want something or I need to figure something out or I need to get some, I will pick up the phone and I will call if I'm nervous, if it's a situation where I don't really know exactly what to say, and I'll just start talking and then I'll pivot off of where that conversation's flowing because I'd rather be in the opportunity to start the conversation and pivot off of it and develop it and move forward in that pivoting role versus trying to research and
Yeah.
delegate and send the
Well, and that
perfect
makes
text
sense to me
message.
because
So
cognitively, with your initiating quick start, you shouldn't be overly scripted, especially because then you add that quick start does need to improvise some and just you get ideas that you didn't know they were great ideas until they came out of your mouth. And you're like, damn, I kind of like that. Um, and also with the follow through and the fact finder to some extent, um, the follow through is the plan. So that would be more the script. Like there's some people, salespeople, where, yeah, they need to know here's where I start. Here's the flow chart, basically. I start here and then it branches. And then depending on their answers, I go this track or that track. That's fine if that's been developed and you can read and go, yeah, yeah, okay, I got the general concept. You're more, I get the general concept of what the flow could look like, but I just want to be in it. Yeah, let you
and
make
then
it
let
your
me
own
make it my
versus other
own.
people who are
Yeah.
like, no, no, no. I love that I have this flow chart and the script even, and I'm gonna stick with it, and their problem then is if they get to a branch and that hasn't been written up and anticipated, they're like, oh no, I wasn't ready for that response.
I don't know where
Right.
to
And
go
then
or what
that
to say. I'm
person, what they would
stuck.
do,
And
if they
the
had different strengths than you, they would kind of be stuck, maybe not handle the call really well, but they would then add to that script. And you're like, okay, here's a new thing we need to put on there. Let's train the team so that now everybody's ready for this variable that we weren't expecting. Whereas you'd be less likely to follow that up. You'd kind of do it in the moment. You'd naturally be more inclined to have an answer for it, even if you were just making one up. But then you wouldn't go back and change the whole system necessarily. Another thing that I was struck by in listening to your response is you were talking about the game show and kind of you just became the leader of this alliance apparently. And I think there's probably a lot going on. And, we're talking about your cognitive strengths, your Kolbe result, but undoubtedly there's part of the affective part of you. So some of your people skills are driven by your affect. So, how warm you are with other people, do you give off you can trust me vibes versus do you give off kind of prickly, be wary of me vibes. So I think there are both of those. I think your Colby result, the people side, is, as I was saying earlier, because you accommodate in three of the modes and there's none of them where you really push back and resist, it is more natural for you to be able to work with a broad breadth of people. And also your description of the kids, I think that's probably, in my experience, that sounds like more of an affective thing. And yeah, I mean, I think the conventional wisdom is that there is also a little bit of a gender difference. More guys tend to be more ready to watch their kids doing physical stuff where they might get hurt and just hang back and be like, yeah, they might, but A, I think I can grab them before it's real serious. And B, it's like, yeah, and if it's small, they're going to learn from it and they'll bounce back and, rub some dirt on it, kid. And the moms tend to be a little bit more, oh, hey, let's keep them safe. But I don't know. That's obviously just A, conventional wisdom, and B, one guy's observation. So
absolutely. I I have a small question, and I don't know if this is jumping ahead or back, but in the same kind of ideas realm, what I've always found myself personally doing is, to your point, I would come up with what I felt like were really great ideas. Or I don't know if you game or if anyone you know is a gamer, but there's like a game where you would create a character. You would build them, you'd create their race, their class, their size, and you'd do their skill sets, etc. And let's say the game takes 10 hours to complete. I found myself a lot of times getting that character to about hour 4 and then wanting to restart with a completely new character, different race, different build, different style. And then I would get to that character to hour 4 and then I'd want to restart. So I always find myself in these scenarios where I feel like I have these great ideas. I jump in and I start going and I get it going. And then I just kind of like drop it, not necessarily because a new idea comes up, because I get to a point where it's like, okay, like that kind of ran its course, or I, I, I don't know. I've always kind of had that
Yeah, and
feeling.
I think in a gaming environment, it's easier to just say, okay, that's fine. Like there's nothing compelling me to need to take it to hour 10 or, do those other steps or add those little incremental changes that are going to get you that much more successful and gain more power, whatever the goal of that game is. I think in a work setting, there are times where you're going to feel more pressure. It's like, well, this project, I can't just drop this project at hour 4, kind of the, you know, metaphorical hour 4. It's like, man, my job is I need to take this further. But what I would say to you is find the opportunity professionally to be in a position, and maybe you already are, where your role is to take things to hour 4 and then to hand it off and to say to other
And then
people in the
hand it off.
professional setting, look,
Yep.
I know this is on the right course. The best use of my time and energy, and it's really your energy is the better way to think. Other people need to see it through. Like the company will be successful when we go all the way and make this great, not just to where I got it, but I need to start on the next thing because the company will do best when you're able to thrive using that. But what we see sometimes in company setups is they don't know this cognitive piece. So they think, okay, well, you were great at getting it this far, so you must be the right person for the next 3 steps. But what's the point of slogging away for those other 6 hours if it's not something you enjoy? You're not particularly great at it. You really love this other part of the game. So I love the fact that you've kind of recognized this. You do it. You're like, yeah, I scrap it. I start over and do the parts that I thrive on. But it's harder sometimes again to set the ego aside.
Yeah. When and what I've found a lot of times too is I get it to that hour 4, and then I don't necessarily have a team or others that I can hand it off to. Um, or to your point, I get it to hour 4, and then you've done such a good job to hour 4, just take it to hour 5 and 6, and then it almost like I lose the motivation because I'm not good at that part. Whatever that part is, like I feel like, oh man, I have such a good thing. This is going great. I've got it here. Okay, who can take this? Because I know this is gonna. I need someone that can do this and this and this, and then it's finding those people or those situations where I can get it in those hands. And then if I can't get it in those hands, it's like, okay, well, now I'm stuck because I don't want to push it past hour 4. So then I go back and I start. And in the same vein, sometimes I'll get something to hour 4, and maybe the ego is, if I take this to hour 10, I don't know if it'll be the best or the greatest. So maybe I need to
Maybe,
start over
but
with something
honestly,
else.
I would think that's probably not true for you. I mean, I understand it's like, oh, maybe it's a fear of failure. It's not what I'm hearing. It's not what I would predict from your Colby result. It's much more about, yeah, I might be super successful doing that, but I'm not going to get that sense of joy and accomplishment. So I'm going to go back and start at the beginning because that's what gets me pumped. Um, you know,
Yeah,
if
that's
you wanted to
that's
pursue it
true.
further, and given that you are a gamer and you are a game shower, um, you know, if it's esports, I would say, yeah, get yourself on a team. I see you being most successful in team esports rather than, and I mean true interdependent cooperative teams, not just, oh, our scores add up. We each do our part. find a team situation where your role is that more idea generating and formation up to a certain point, and then other people maybe take the character and execute on it and then add a little bit to the framework that you've built.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense actually. And finding what I've found is David is finding that person that I can hand that off to, that I feel that trust and that recognition or that cohesiveness is especially in a work or business environment can be very challenging. And then in a lot of industries, they just expect that person who got to hour 4 to take it the rest of the way, which is almost the most discouraging thing you could tell that person that just got it to hour 4.
Yeah, and there's
But
sometimes you're
that makes
just
a lot of
that is
sense.
going to be the expectation and you're going to need to do it, but try to create a role for yourself or find one, professionally and personally or in your hobbies where you can hand it off. Another thing that I'll say though, thinking we've been talking so much about you, yes, and maybe on a team, but when you're on that team, also keep in mind, yeah, you need to set aside your ego so it's not, oh, I have to do all parts of this. You also have to give the other person credit. So what I see sometimes with people with a similar Kolbe result to yours is you start over. It's not that you overvalue yourself. I want you to value yourself a ton and be super confident, bordering on cocky. That's fine. I don't mind. Um, but not if it gets to the point where you start thinking, oh yeah, I did all the important stuff. I handed it over and now they're going to do the easy, boring parts. They're doing parts that are just as important, just as difficult. I mean, and they're difficult because you want to hand them over. Like if they were so simple, you could just, without thinking about it much, just do the next few hours and get great results. But you need those other people. So make sure that you're giving them the credit that they deserve and thanking them for doing all of it. Um, we all forget about exactly your Kolbe result. We all can fall into that trap of, oh, our strengths are most important and most valuable. And the other stuff is just the drudge work that somebody else is handling. So don't fall into that trap.
Right, right. That makes 100% sense as well. And a small follow-up question there. Sometimes I find myself in the scenario where, like, I know that it's kind of a mixture of both, where it's like I do love recognition for the things that I do, but I also love to give recognition to the other people. And it's finding that balance of giving the most recognition, giving the equal amount of recognition while also trying to have the recognition, because I felt like sometimes I've given a lot of recognition at the expense of taking none of it, even though I was a big part of it. And then vice versa, to your point. Sometimes I take a little more of it or not discredit, but almost say, hey, like you did get that over the line, but you got to remember I did
Yeah.
85% of this thing,
I wish there were an easy answer. And frankly, I don't think this is cognitive, but I'll just say from my experience, reading a company, it's an art. It's not a science. It's not like, oh, here's the formula you apply to that question. You have to, but you're hitting on the important points. You do need to make sure that people understand your contribution. Um, and earlier today, I was talking to people kind of earlier in their careers and how to develop stuff. And, it's even trickier then where you don't want to look like, hey, boss, look at me. I'm so important. But at the same time, if people don't understand the role you're playing, it's really easy for them to forget about you. So, similar thing, I would say as you're further into your career, it's you have more leeway to give other people credit without getting lost and having your part being lost. Another thing you can do is model. When you model for other people, giving them credit, those people will often then mirror that back to you and they'll give you credit. And it would, in a sincere way. Find people you trust who will call you on your BS. Um, and just ask them, like, if you're in a meeting and you say something about how, oh my gosh, thanks to Jane, this was amazing and so glad you did that. And, I remember when I was starting this project, and however you figure out a little sly way to inject what you did in it, after that meeting, go to that person you really trust and say, how did I do? Like, did that come off okay, or did I sound a little arrogant and obnoxious? But yeah, finding people who will uh, really be honest with you and tell you the tough stuff. But I mean, you've got to be willing to listen to the tough stuff and not just get defensive and mad at them too. So
Yeah, I always remember, gosh, I forget who told me, but you can't go to people continually trying to find the answers you want, right? Um, and it's like, so like, for instance, if you go to someone and they give you an answer and you don't like it, don't go to someone else because you didn't like the answer you got, looking for the answer you want. Because a lot of times the answer you want isn't the answer that you need. So if you can find the people that give you the answer that you need, that those are the
yeah,
people you should probably
absolutely.
be leaning on a lot.
And it's not going to be a lot of people.
It's not. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but
Yeah.
that's
So
that's the
pivoting
world.
a little here. So you've kind of mentioned your personal life and your wife and your kids. You know, it's very similar, and it's a really important relationship, especially, well, it's all the time, but then when you've got kids and your kids are young, how old are they again?
Four and a half
Yeah,
and six and a
so,
half girls.
they're challenging you and taking up time and, throwing curveballs that you can't expect. Um, and you're a conative team with your wife, and I don't know her results, but you guys can figure them out. If you have questions, give me a call and we can talk about that too. But the key thing is, whatever your respective strengths are, really value what she brings to the table, communicate with each other about, hey, this is who I am, this is how I operate conatively. So for example, with you, um, you're not the natural planner person and the thorough calendar and make sure everything's on it and make sure that every box gets checked off as you go along. You'll do some of that. You're not a total outside the, well, a little outside the box, but so I don't know what your wife is. If she's a planner, figure out how that works between the two of you. That's great that you guys would complement each other, but you might also have some conflict around it. So figure out what that is, and then let understanding it in a new way and understanding, hey, it's not that she's not smart about it, or it's not that you don't care because you don't things the way she would like you to necessarily, or the way she does them. It's we're just different people. And let's make that work to our advantage, because the more bases you cover, kind of the better, generally speaking. It's just making sure that it doesn't become a point of conflict.
Yeah, I think one thing with us, we're definitely not the same. Which if we were, I think that would be not good. And one thing that was really powerful was it's not me versus you, it's you and I versus that, right? So making sure that we are on the same side against whatever X is, right? Whatever the problem is or the person is, not that there's persons in our life like that, but like for instance, it's like the dishes, right? So it's not me versus you on you didn't do the dishes, etc. It's me and you versus getting the dishes done, and we're on the same team and trying to execute that. But a really good example, sorry, this is hopefully this will help. Uh, my daughter's kindergarten graduation was today, and we dropped her off at school at 7:10, and the ceremony to get in was going to be at 8 a.m. And after we dropped her off, my wife was like, okay, let's go park in the parking lot and wait at the front gate. And I was like, I'm not going to stand at the front gate for an hour. Let's go to a Starbucks, grab a coffee, come back and park, and then we'll at least shaved off some time from that. And to her brain, that gets her in a little bit more of an anxious panic kind of mode because she has this plan and this structure, and we're going to be there and we're going to be on time and we're going to be in front of the gate. And I'm thinking, we have time to kill before we need to be there. Let's just go pivot to this, kill some of that time so we're not sitting around not doing anything. So that's like a little example of like some of our situations is she definitely plans and I usually go with the plan
Right.
and then
Yeah. So
improvise
with
on it
that as
a
an
lot of the
example,
time.
and let's kind of assume that she's, I mean, you're describing her as a planner. Let's assume that means she's a more initiating follow through in terms of Colby. A suggestion I can have for you then is, okay, now, you know that. So again, let's assume that's true. So it's not a matter of changing her and letting her, trying to force her to, hey, you had this plan about what we were going to do, but just ignore that and do what I want to do. Even if that's the outcome, if you approach it as, hey, let's have a quick alternate plan. I know it's important that we're here at least 10 minutes before that gate is open. So working backward from that, we've got a 40-minute chunk that we can drive to the Starbucks. It's going to take 2 minutes. If the line's long, it's 5 minutes. We've got plenty of time. You get to the same outcome, but now instead of her having an immediate defensive push back on you kind of reaction, it's, oh, he just gave me an alternate plan. He showed me how it's going to fit with what I wanted to do. I mean, there are other ways you can do it. Another thing could be, but you're probably not going to do this, especially with a small thing. I mean, we just wouldn't think of it. But if you thought of it the night before, you saw, oh my gosh, there's this 50-minute gap. The night before, you could say to her, hey, honey, tomorrow morning, what's a good plan so that we can drop her off, but not like just have to sit in a parking lot for 40 minutes. I was thinking maybe we could go to Starbucks, but is there something else we can do? Give her time to think about it. And then whether it's that night or in the morning, she'll just tell you, oh, honey, you asked about the plan. So we're going to go to Starbucks and sit there for 40 minutes. You're like, yeah, that's what I was hoping for anyway, but now it's her idea. So it's all good.
Yep. Yep. And to that point, for me, if the plan was X and we had 50 minutes, I would just be down to do whatever. It's like, okay, well, yeah, sure. Let's kill 40 minutes. We can go there. We go there. Sure. Because I'm thinking about killing it. But for her, assuming she falls into that Kolbe, she may need that preparation or that advance on those processes so that she's feeling comfortable and non-anxious.
Yeah, and some of it's the preparation and some of it is just the plan. Like if in her mind, like she prepped for it, let's just assume, and she probably did. Like the night before, she thought about this 15-minute gap, and her solution was, I'm fine sitting in the car. I'll be on my phone and handle emails and other stuff. So that's her plan. So when you change it, it's the anxiety in that case is probably coming from, but I had a plan and he's messing with my plan. And Eric doesn't even care. Why does he's not a planner guy and he's messing with mine. Meanwhile, you're not thinking, oh, let's mess with my wife's plan. You're just like, well, this sounds like a good idea. Another thing from a parenting standpoint that my wife and I talked about a lot is divide and conquer. It's like, well, here's a plan. How about you do what you wanted and I do what I wanted? And it's okay. But again, you communicate that like, hey, I know how important it is. I'm still going to be on time. Don't worry, honey. I'm not going to leave and not show up until midway through the graduation ceremony. But in the meantime, I'm going to do this, but I don't want to mess up what you had planned for the next 45 minutes. So.
Right. So you do the plan you had. I will meet you at the X point of that plan that we agree upon.
And also in terms of parenting and dividing and conquering, it's when you know your different roles, so let's say it's coming up with a plan. You both shouldn't come up with the plan. Let her do it. You need to be informed of what it is, but you don't, you trust her. She's going to come up with a good one. You need to know what it is, but you don't both have to be involved in the planning process.
Yeah.
Do you have any other questions or things we haven't touched on you want to talk about?
I guess back to the kind of like 1 hour to 4 hour and then picking it up from there. Is there a good way to find those people that can mesh with me in that scenario, right? Like, for example, I have a friend named Derek, and Derek is very different from me in a lot of elements where, I don't know how he would score on the Kolbe, but I assume we'd probably have very different scores based on what I know about him, right? And I guess like sometimes I feel like I struggle at finding those types of people that can help me piece the whole 10 hours together. And I don't know if there's like something I could be seeking or a way to be defining.
I think it's, if you're doing it at work, you've got a group of people who you work with, and I would just try to see how they operate and figure out the ones who do things differently. We're like, hey, I think we mesh well because we can trade things off. Then there are other people where it's like, for you, there are times you're going to need a brainstorming partner where it's, hey, let's just talk about stuff. And both of us know we aren't necessarily going to take these to the next step, but I just want to bounce some stuff off of you. And you'll find those people, those people are more like you than dislike you, or they're similar to you.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And you kind of realize like you just working in general, you kind of end up, and just relationships and communication, like you end up understanding some of those pieces and things like that. But yeah, it was just I guess one of my questions was around that of like trying to like give off some sort of a vibration so those people come to me and we
Yeah.
can build things
Well,
together. So
I think they will come to you. You give off vibrations, and you'll find them. But it's really being on the lookout and be a little specific. So if it's, hey, I really need that uh, planning systems kind of person in my work life. I kind of have that with my wife at home. I'd love to work with somebody who's like that. Look for those specific traits. Read your own Kolbe result, and it'll talk about your counterpoint a little bit in there too. And you can say, okay, I'm going to look for people who operate like that. And maybe those are the people I should spend more time with.
yeah, that makes sense. Very cool.
Yeah. So, Eric, your Kolbe result overall is 4474. So, 4 fact finder, 4 follow through, 7 quick start, and 4 implementer. And I'm also curious, what are you going to take away from this? What kind of applications, or where are you going to put it to use?
Yeah, I think maybe if there's a game show contestant career in my future, I could definitely apply it there. But I think just the deeper understanding of not just how I approach things, but understanding that where I work best and where I function best is in the 4474, and communicating and finding those people that can help put those pieces together to complete the project. Because that was really always something that was kind of frustrating to me, is I felt like I would have these really great ideas and I'd get them to X, and then I wouldn't get them to Y or Z. And I always thought that was because maybe I was inadequate, or I wasn't doing something properly, or I didn't have the motivation, when in reality, it's like, no, X, Y, and Z are three separate letters. I'm just really good at X. I need to find the Y and the Z that can help me
Yep,
complete the
absolutely.
end of the
So
alphabet.
whether that's, an assistant, a junior person, professionally who you can hand stuff off to at that point, yeah, find those people to collaborate with that do Y and Z great.